He stood in front of the mirror, frantically scrubbing his hands. The whole process was tedious, meticulous, and very forceful, until his fingers were rubbed raw and bleeding. He picked up a tissue to wipe away the blood, only to find a stain on his shirt. Then he started scrubbing his shirt like crazy. Once everything was clean and he was ready to leave, the doorknob stopped him. She didn't want to touch the doorknob with her hands, but the tissues in the bathroom were all used up. After a long mental struggle, she still couldn't bring herself to touch the doorknob. Helpless, she stood by the door, waiting for someone to open it. Luckily, it wasn't long before someone came. When eating, there must be 12 peas neatly arranged. If a friend accidentally took one, she would immediately look distressed and might even leave the table in anger. To avoid getting anything dirty, he might even choose to wear nothing at all. At work, he was obsessively meticulous about everything. When filming, he would wait over 8 months for the perfect cloud. When designing an airplane, he reviewed over 8,000 steering wheel models and was still unsatisfied. For a new movie's editing, he controlled every frame's detail. For a new plane's test flight, he insisted on testing it himself. He was the inspiration for America's Iron Man, a legendary Hollywood director, a giant in aviation, Howard Hughes. Compared to Musk's 5 love stories and having 6 kids, Howard Hughes, who became the world's richest man at 41, dated 164 Hollywood actresses. A dazzling life indeed. Howard was born into wealth in 1905. His father founded the famous Hughes Tool Company, and his invention of the dual-cone rotary drill bit was revolutionary in oil drilling history. When Howard was born, Houston was experiencing an epidemic. His mother was very cautious, constantly warning him that poor hygiene could lead to terrible consequences. She repeatedly told Howard he wasn't safe and needed isolation. This instilled a deep fear of germs in young Howard's mind. His mother couldn't have imagined that her care would lead to Howard's lifelong compulsive behaviors. As a child, Howard had 3 big dreams: to make the grandest movies, build the fastest plane, and become the richest person in the world. At 18, Howard's parents both passed away due to illness. As the only child, Howard inherited a huge fortune from the Hughes Tool Company, becoming a young oil tycoon. Logically, with wealth and freedom, Howard could have just enjoyed and indulged in life. But he still remembered his childhood dream. He wasn't interested in running the oil business, nor did he like school. So, at 19, he dropped out of Rice University and plunged into Hollywood. Right off the bat, he bought the rights to 125 theaters and began shooting his debut epic war film, Hell's Angels. Industry insiders laughed when they heard the news, as it was still the silent film era, without sound, let alone special effects. In war films, those intense and grand scenes were simply out of the question. Everyone thought Howard, this stubborn rich kid, was just there for laughs. But Howard went ahead and bought 87 fighter planes, hired 35 photographers, 187 pilots, and over 20 actors. He wanted to film real aerial combat scenes. Those who knew understood he was making a movie, while those who didn't thought he was amassing an army for independence. Howard's madness wasn't because he was foolish with money, but because he knew that as a newcomer wanting to make a mark in the arts, he had to break tradition. The first real aerial combat shoot went smoothly, but when watching it, Howard noticed the lack of stationary reference points made the planes appear to fly very slowly. Howard couldn't tolerate such a low-level presentation, so he immediately brought in meteorology experts, observing the stars day and night, just to wait for a beautiful cloud formation as a reference. But this wait lasted over 8 months. The huge personnel expenses burned $25,000 daily, but eventually, the film wrapped successfully. Howard was barely satisfied with the details in all aspects. However, just days after wrapping, sound films emerged, making silent films obsolete. As a late media enthusiast, Howard couldn't allow his debut to be outdated upon release, so he decided to start over. The financial director strongly opposed, as the company's cash flow was already exhausted. Howard waved it off, saying to take loans, mortgage the company, and borrow as much as possible. After 3 years of hard work, the audio version of Hell's Angels is finally complete. The film reel stretches 25 miles long. Without editing, the movie would be over 560 hours. The filming not only resulted in the death of 3 pilots but also cost over $400,000, equivalent to billions today. It's almost certain this is the most expensive film ever made, unmatched in history. Industry experts believe Howard will lose everything due to the high costs. During the Great Depression, people struggled to eat, let alone watch movies. Surprisingly, on the premiere day, over 500,000 people lined Hollywood Boulevard, causing a massive traffic jam. Howard's grand production sparked a viral viewing frenzy, earning over $800,000. At the premiere, Howard felt no joy, just held the lead actress's hand tightly. He found many flaws in the film. He's not a filmmaker, but a relentless dreamer. After watching, he disliked the slow plane speed. He thought the protruding rivets increased drag. To solve this, he started an aircraft company. Howard, self-taught, became the chief engineer, needing a research team. To support the team, he took on aircraft orders. Their main client was Western Airlines. However, the client had low standards, not matching Howard's vision for faster planes. This frustrated him greatly. In anger, he bought Western Airlines. Now, he controlled everything, with no limits on his aircraft designs. Howard personally drew designs, discussing details with engineers tirelessly. Soon, Howard built a smooth plane without protruding rivets. To test it, Howard decided to fly it himself. That's right, he's still an excellent pilot. To minimize the plane's weight, engineers only added enough fuel for 2 laps. That means after 2 laps, it has to land. Howard agreed readily, but once he got on the plane, he forgot everything. He wasn't satisfied with the first and second laps, so he daringly started a third. This time, he finally reached a speed of 352 miles per hour, breaking the fastest flight record at the time. However, before he could prepare to land, the plane ran out of fuel and lost power. Then, it nosedived rapidly, but at the critical moment, Howard pulled the plane up and made a thrilling emergency landing in a field. When the crew arrived, he was calmly smoking by the plane. Later, Howard flew this plane around the world in just 4 days, 3 days faster than the world record holder at the time. After this feat, Howard's name echoed throughout America, and he was awarded the Congressional Medal. Meanwhile, Howard pursued Hollywood star Katharine Hepburn. He landed in front of Hepburn with a domineering presence, flying a plane made by his own company. But Hepburn, being an accomplished woman herself, wasn't easily won over. From then on, Howard became like a devoted dog, following Hepburn's interests, whether it was talking about movies or playing golf. However, these were things others could also offer, until one night, Howard took her on his plane and handed her the controls. This thrilled Hepburn, who loved the plane, and she quickly got the hang of flying it. Besides that, they discovered they had a lot in common. Soon enough, Hepburn was smitten. Not long after, during World War II, the U.S. military needed to transport soldiers to the European front, but the slow ships would be easy targets for German submarines. So, Howard had a bold idea and drew up a massive blueprint. He decided to build a giant plane, 20 feet tall and with a 30-foot wingspan. This size was longer than a typical street and wider than a standard football field. It could transport not only troops but also tanks and armored vehicles. Howard named this giant plane Hercules. The U.S. military gave Howard the go-ahead. The military R&D order includes a giant plane and 10 spy planes. The spy plane is expected to go over 450 mph, and no artillery can hit it. With military backing, Howard is advancing rapidly and has also developed a tech called the Constellation. It can fly smoothly at 20,000 feet. Back then, planes could only fly below 70 feet in the troposphere, where unstable air caused severe turbulence. Due to fear, less than 1% of Americans had flown. Howard thought if a more stable, safer plane was developed, passenger numbers would rise, revolutionizing aviation. He dedicated himself to research daily. Busy with work, Howard ignored Hepburn, leading to her affair. That night, she confessed to Howard. Howard saw it as betrayal. They argued fiercely that night and parted badly. Afterward, Howard burned all his clothes, not even keeping a pair of shorts, feeling Hepburn's infidelity was unclean. But when he found out a paparazzo took photos of Hepburn with a married man, Howard secretly bought the photos. While Howard was reforming, his actions alarmed Pan Am, the only U.S. international airline then. Wan's worries were right. Howard aimed to develop international airline business. To make a splash, he renamed Western Airlines to Trans World Airlines. To block Howard's plans, Wan used connections to have a congressman propose the Airline Community Act. This act pushed for one airline for international business, cutting costs without competition, offering better, cheaper services. This clearly showed they didn't plan to give Howard any chance. Facing blatant collusion, Howard was naturally upset, but he had little energy to deal with it as the military order was about to be delayed, and the Hercules production was tougher than expected. All this was almost suffocating Howard, but it was also tied to his perfectionism. Just the plane's steering wheel, Howard reviewed over 8,000 plans but still couldn't decide. Feeling agitated, he noticed the janitor's dirty nails, triggering his OCD. Howard felt watched, and his speech became erratic, repeating the same phrase. On July 7, 1946, the spy plane was finally completed. As usual, Howard personally test flew it. This plane, setting a new speed record, made Howard feel great. However, after flying for over 90 minutes, the right engine suddenly failed, and the plane plummeted without warning. Despite all efforts, Howard couldn't regain control and had to make an emergency landing in the middle of a film set, tearing through rooftops and splitting a house in two. The plane disintegrated in the crash and finally exploded. In the end, he crashed backward into debris. When he crawled out of the inferno, he was barely alive. Fortunately, passers-by heard the commotion and rushed to help. After rescue efforts, Howard miraculously survived, but he suffered multiple fractures and burns covering 78% of his body. The impact also caused his heart to shift. Bad news kept coming. A new technology crashed during operation, leading the Civil Aviation Authority to ground Howard's company. Meanwhile, World War II had ended, and the military canceled the Hercules order. The CFO informed Howard that the company's finances were dire and suggested halting Hercules production. Despite being exhausted in the hospital, Howard decided to fund the project himself. determined to see Hercules fly one day. Even severely injured, Howard's spirit remained unbroken. After some time, his body barely recovered. The flight ban on the company would last several more months. If the Aviation Community Act passed, Pan Am would monopolize all international flights, making any efforts futile. Therefore, the best choice now is to complete the Hercules development quickly and seize the last opportunity. However, the production of Hercules has always been at a bottleneck. Moreover, the senators bribed by Juan have also started causing trouble. He maliciously approached Howard, initially smiling and exchanging pleasantries, then shifted the conversation to seek Howard's support for the bill. If he disagrees, he will hold a hearing and use the evidence he has to accuse Howard of being a war profiteer. Howard can't swallow this insult. It's impossible for him to back down. So, he retaliated against the shameless senator. In the end, they parted on bad terms. Fearing more incriminating evidence might be found, Howard became extremely sensitive, even bugging his girlfriend. His girlfriend, who already had a temper, upon learning this, hit Howard on the head. Soon after, the senator held a press conference. He claimed that during the war, Howard made a lot of money from the government, labeling him a war profiteer. The external doubts placed unprecedented pressure on Howard. Under the influence of his OCD, he isolated himself in a room, avoiding germs by not wearing clothes, surviving only on milk. Even the simple act of getting milk required long internal deliberation. After some time, Hepburn suddenly visited, worried about Howard's state and also about the scandalous photos. He wanted to help Howard out of his gloom, but Howard was already deeply despondent. Especially after learning Hepburn didn't love him, he felt lost, like a ship without a captain, and cried silently behind the door. After some more time, the room became a mess, and Howard was near a breakdown. Every day, he repeated the same sentence over and over. Eventually, the room was filled with bottles, one side with unopened milk, the other with neatly arranged urine. Upon learning of Howard's situation, Juan was overjoyed. He personally came to persuade, "If you agree to sell Trans World Airlines to me at a low price, I will ensure you won't have to attend the hearing." This way, the external doubts and criticisms will naturally disappear. But he underestimated Howard's strong will. Despite being down for a long time, Howard still firmly refused to buy and painfully accused Juan of being a petty bribed official, drafting the aviation joint bill for his own selfish reasons. However, Juan refused to admit it, smugly stating through the keyhole that even if you disagree now, the hearing can prove the bankruptcy of global airlines. By then, you can only resign to fate. At this moment, Howard realized he was cornered. Despite this, he still chose not to compromise. After this incident, Howard decided to make some changes. That day, he finally stepped out of the room and welcomed his girlfriend's visit. At this time, the room was filled with paper scraps and threads. Seeing the unkempt Howard, his girlfriend personally helped tidy him up. This time, Howard successfully overcame his germophobia and put his hands in the sink to wash. Soon, the clean and handsome aviator returned. Before leaving, his girlfriend gave him a sweet kiss and offered sincere blessings to Howard. "I know you can make a comeback." Not long after, the hearing was held as scheduled. The senator directly accused Howard of defrauding the military of $5.06 million because he did not deliver the Hercules reconnaissance aircraft. Facing the cameras and the bustling crowd, Howard still felt a bit uneasy, but he had fully regained his composure. He then began to respond with a rigorous mindset. "Though I didn't deliver any planes, during the war, the military placed $800 million in orders with many airlines. Few delivered, yet only I'm on trial. It's because I opposed the aviation bill, protesting Pan Am's monopoly, leading to this treatment." The senator immediately warned Howard that this was slander against Mr. Juan. However, the righteous entrepreneur, a major taxpayer for decades, was not only upright but also charitable. Not only did he give your family a global flight membership, but also a substantial amount of Pan Am stock. Upon hearing this cliché of money for favors, the audience burst into laughter. This was quite the spectacle, a hearing that lasted 3 days. For 3 days, they kept hounding Howard relentlessly. Finally, Howard couldn't take it anymore and declared, "Even though I've spent the government's military budget on building planes, I've also invested a lot of my own money. I'll keep investing, even if it means going bankrupt. I hope everyone can look at the bigger picture. If Hercules succeeds, it will be a milestone in aviation history and boost the nation's industry. If it fails, you can charge me, imprison me, or even exile me." After saying this, Howard stormed off, leaving the room in thunderous applause. The senators had nothing to say. They had no reason to target such an idealistic entrepreneur and engineer. In January 1947, the world's largest plane, Hercules, was finally completed, resembling a giant ship docked at Long Beach. Howard personally oversaw its test flight. Before departure, meteorologists warned of headwinds, but Howard was undeterred. He never feared failure, only mediocrity without breakthroughs. As he accelerated, the plane began to shake due to the waves. At 75 mph, amidst the crowd's anticipation and tension, Hercules successfully took off. Everyone cheered for this historic moment. Howard once again became the focus of national attention. When the giant took off, Howard knew his efforts weren't in vain. Yet he didn't stop exploring. After the test flight, he discussed new aviation technologies with his team, aiming to use jet engines in passenger planes. At that moment, three men in suits caught Howard's attention. In his obsessive imagination, he felt they were plotting against him. In reality, they were just ordinary staff. Howard's OCD kicked in, and he started repeating, "The situation is bad." His subordinates quickly pulled him into the restroom. Looking at himself in the mirror, Howard suddenly remembered his childhood dreams. At that moment, he realized he had fulfilled them, flying the fastest plane, making the best movies, and becoming the richest man in the world. What awaits him is a brighter future. The Aviator is a 2004 American biopic directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Cate Blanchett. The story is based on true events, showcasing Howard Hughes' extraordinary life. The film intertwines Howard's fate with the historical context. Its exploration in film and aviation reflects the spirit of the times. It's not just about personal legend, but exploring deeper dreams through Howard's experiences. This is one of the film's core themes. In both film and aviation, Howard maintained pure passion. In pursuing dreams, challenges are inevitable. His OCD made life hard, and emotional issues caused pain. His obsessive thoughts led to heavy costs. Yet, these flaws sparked a strong will, creating Howard's legendary life. The line between madness and genius is blurred. People couldn't understand Howard, but he knew he had to protect himself. In his eyes, he was like a child, a marginal figure struggling in life. Fortunately, Howard remained brave and confident, never giving up on his goals. Dreams are like wings, carrying him against the wind. As a symbol of the American dream, Howard achieved his childhood dreams through innovation and risk-taking. Despite the scars and costs, he built the world's fastest plane and became the richest man. Howard may fade into history, but his legendary life never ends. His resilient spirit will inspire generations to chase their dreams and soar higher. Life is long, and we can all become aviators. The sky is no longer a limit but a stage for life. Let's fly freely with our dreams. Alright, that's all for today's movie. Feel free to like, comment, and share. Looking forward to our next meeting.